And we're here with Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. You had a long day on Monday. Very long day, to say the least. Tell the listeners what you were up to.
I was back in the Bruins locker room for the first time since March 2020.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess there are some positive take from it. But yeah, doing the usual end of season media breakup day with all the Bruins players. So pretty much a marathon from 9 to 5:30 in terms of stuff.
Who went
So
last?
last was McAvoy. So
Okay.
an endless parade of usually probably despondent NHL players that talking about injuries, or it's only one team every year that has like an enjoyable media day. All the other ones
Yes.
are miserable. It's either like you didn't make the playoffs and you're pissed, or you lose in the first round and what could have been, or it's 2019 you lose the cup, and that was the worst media day. But
That was a very depressing media day.
yes, that was not great.
I was there for that. I was not here for this. I was there though for all. Remember last year it was all Zooms. It was just like Zoom,
Yes,
just all day long.
it's like a
Sitting at
Mazda
your
ad.
desk.
Just zoom.
Shut up. It's true. It is true. Anyways, lots of stuff to hit on. I'm gonna hit on a few things. We're gonna hit on some off-season topics for down the road. Again, a lot of I think it's funny. We all say our thank yous on Twitter. The content does not end. Actually, it kind of ramps up. Or it becomes more, honestly, in the next couple of weeks and months. And there's obviously a lot of questions, some obvious ones, some not so obvious ones. But I want to start first with the Carolina series, because I feel like this wasn't a disappointing loss in the sense that, like last year was, how did you lose to the Island? Like, how did you manage to do that? This was more so like they were so close. They couldn't figure out how to win in Carolina. The secondary scoring wasn't there. But if it showed up remotely, as Brad Marchand said, you're probably making a real run after.
Yeah, I think that's probably the worst part. And that's something that Marchand more or less doubled down in saying today, that he thought that if they beat Carolina, they were going to the finals, which shows you what they think maybe the rest of the East. But at the very least, I think they'd be considered a favorite against the Rangers, who, again, that defense is not very good. And Shesterkin's been kind of shaky. And then that point again, who the fuck knows, right? Like you get to the third round, and whether it's Florida or Tampa Bay, one of those teams is coming out after going through it. Yeah, exactly. Of course. But whoever's coming out of that in that third round matchup is going through a meat grinder, whether it's who they played in the first round or what's I assume is going to be a war in Florida over that second round series. So who knows what happens? I mean, literally look at like just the Celtics right now. People will, you don't see it as much from, I think, Celtics Twitter, because they're usually a lot more positive on there, but there's not, hopping on the fact that guys like Lowry have been hurt, Chris Middleton, not having those qualifiers. You know what? Sometimes luck breaks your way. And in playoffs, and just being in the chase and advancing is enough that you give yourself a better chance to go on one of these runs. So who knows what would have happened if they got that far. So I think that's what disappointing is when you look at just how the Bruins came up short. And it's one thing if you lose in 4 or 5, you're like, well, that sucked. Or, a situation where they were clearly overmatched. They put themselves right back into it. So to lose in game 7 like that, where you felt like, all right, it's so lopsided the first 3 games down at PNC Arena, like something's got to give. Did not happen. So yeah, it's definitely a backbreaker when you look at not only the fact of what the path could have been for them getting past Carolina, getting over that hump, but also the fact that who knows how many more kicks of the can you're going to get with this core in place.
Yeah, that's the kicks at the can thing we've been saying now for like 3 years at this point. I think the more relevant thing, at least for now, that obviously is one of them. But the new thing is like the Hurricanes were the better team. I don't think anyone like debates that. But if you just found a way to get past them, like that's the one thing where I think the Bruins will kind of kick themselves all summer, where it's like, if the third line just cashed in a few times more, or like if they finish those chances, like we didn't do the post-game show after game 7. So the curse is over. Your curse is done on the post-game show. You're back, baby. You're coming back. Luckily, no post-game shows coming up, but I think just, you look at some of those missed chances in game 7, Hall and puck went through Pasternak's legs in the final 5 minutes. Coyle. And like you had chances there to even the game. Trent Frederick hit the post, and then went the other way and decided he didn't want to play defense. So like those things, like just if it just broken your way, we are doing a very different podcast today. By the way, how was Raleigh?
It was lovely. I was there for like approximately 16 hours. And I did it like 2:45 p.m. day of the game. Went right to the arena, and then I was up in the air at 6 a.m. the next morning. So it was a quick trip, business trip, Evan. But I still managed to get some Waffle House at about 12 a.m. I was sharing in the sorrows of most people who are at Waffle House at 12 a.m. In the immediate aftermath of a Bruins season-ending loss. So sorry, wine. No disrespect to Waffle House, by the way. Waffle House, you've not been fantastic.
I'll be in Atlanta at the end of the month. I hope they have some Waffle Houses.
It is Georgia. They will absolutely have some Waffle Houses.
I will definitely be heading to Waffle House. But yes, it's so funny. Did you go to sleep at all?
Barely. No, not really.
Okay.
So, yeah, but you know what? Got back to Boston and then fell asleep for like 8 hours. So it worked out.
Business trip. You went there. You had what you do. Mainly go to Waffle House. Boom, done. Anyways, yes, quite the game 7, quite the series. But again, I don't put this on the level of like the Islanders series last year, or obviously the series that happened in 2019. I don't put that near that level. But I do think, again, disappointing because I think they would have had a real shot going forward. Now it leads to the offseason, right? The big offseason. And on media day on Monday, I don't think it surprised anyone that Patrice Bergeron kind of didn't get, I don't think Bergeron was going to come out and be like, yeah, I'm retiring, guys, or like, I'm coming back. Like, I don't think the announcement was ever going to come at media day, but it did give some insight into what his plans are. And right now he's kind of said, hey, look, I want some time with my family, which it makes sense. It's very acceptable. But he did say to Matt Porter in the dressing room, this is the benefit of open locker rooms, that he is not going to be heading to Montreal. He said to the media that, I know, can you believe it? Said to the media that he does not see himself playing anywhere else. I'm so happy that he shut the Montreal thing down, because that was such a load of bullshit from like the beginning of that. That wasn't just like NBC saying it. This has been like floating around for a while now.
Yeah, it's the laziest version of like trying to connect the dots when there's nothing there. When it takes, it's like you're going through like a Dan Flash's t-shirt, like trying to find any sort of connection there, and it does not work. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's one of those ones where if usually you're, someone who's on the outside, not really actually paying attention to the team, which is usually what the recurring trend is. You would think like,
how that works.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Like Patrice, like, I think he speaks French. He must be a Montreal Canadiens fan, as it was pronounced on the broadcast. Canadians. The
Montreal Canadiens. That was how he said it.
I mean, you look at just that situation of just how lazy those narratives were. I mean, it's been noted time and time again that Patrice was a Quebec Nordiques fan, like growing up. Like, it's one of those situations where it's just so infuriating, because it's just so that's so easily broken down, and you look at it with a clear lens, and you do a little bit of research, and you realize that it made no sense. Oh, along with the fact that, let's say even if Patrice was from Montreal, that is a dog shit team. Like, why are you going there? Like, of all the situations, not only the fact that I don't think they even have a lot of cap room. Like, they've got like either dead cap or something like that. And also, like, Montreal would probably rather tank. You know what probably is a best situation for Montreal and a terrible situation for the Bruins is them getting Wright and Bedard the 2 years in a row. Like, they're not trying to like get a flashy player like Patrice Bergeron right now. It makes no sense of it. It's so stupid. People are so dumb.
I don't get it. So I don't understand, like, if you're a casual fan, right, and you don't pay attention, which is fine. Like, you watch the Bruins when they play, like, that's totally fine. That's you, right? You might immediately think, oh, he's from that area. Maybe he liked the Canadians. Maybe that might make sense, right? But if you just do like 5 minutes of homework, it's like, if fans say it, it's fine, right? But if it's like analysts, people getting paid for their opinion, or reporters or whomever saying this stuff, like, do 2 minutes of homework. You will find that never made any sense if you just considered facts. And credit to DJ Bean on the broadcast saying like, oh, you want him to go to the worst team in the league. Like, that makes perfect sense. So yeah, that whole thing was a crock. I'm glad that's kind of done. A lot of weird Bergeron takes. Granted, it's been 2, but that's too many. You had that on NBC. You had Jermaine Wiggins saying that was it he's overrated or something?
He's underachieved, or I think it was underachieved. Yeah.
Thanks, Wiggy. Appreciate that. That was quite the opinion.
Yeah, shit.
Yeah, great job, guys. So Interesting day. Lots of things going on with media day. Jake DeBrusk is another big offseason question. I think there's a lot of questions with this team because you have I think even David Pastrnak, I consider to be a question mark for next season. Jake DeBrusk is one that's been odd because did he really give confirmation if the trade request was still in? He kind of just said, I'm going to go home and decide then.
Yeah, it was more or less, I believe the question was have you given any thought about staying here? And I think he's I haven't really thought about it yet. So it was more or less kicking that can further down the road, I think is more or less what it was, which I would assume means that he probably still has it and he's still probably looking to get traded. But again, even though he probably still wants to, I don't know if either the Bruins are still going to oblige. Again, it all comes out. It's so tough to map out a grand scheme or a mock offseason right now because you're going to go in two drastically different ways depending on whether or not Bergeron's back or not. If Bergeron's gone, then you sell him for assets at that point and probably get a good return. But if Bergeron's back, again, you might have to move to DeBrusk for cap relief or what have you. But he's also a guy that if you're trying to run him back or try to improve this roster to make another one last run at it, he scored 25 goals. He's a top 6 guy. It's not a guy that you're gonna, I think, then just sell for, two second-round picks. What are you gonna get from him there that falls in line with improving this team for right now to make the most of if Bergeron comes back? So it all revolves everything, not just DeBrusk, but everything the Bruins do off of what Bergeron ends up deciding.
You're 100% right. I don't think either option is blow it up. And I think that's one thing that I've heard over the past couple of days, people, on Twitter and radio saying they need a whole overhaul. I don't think people understand what an overhaul would look like. An overhaul would be, you would take Marchand and deal him for probably a fairly solid haul. He's got a good contract. In that world, you would get a lot for him. Would you deal McAvoy? Would you deal Swayman? Would you deal Pastrnak because he has 1 year left on his deal? The team would stink. The team would be if you are annoyed at being a wild card team, have fun being Detroit. So that's what I always say to people who want to blow it up. And you've said this throughout the year, there's a core there. There is a core. They have a core. They have a core that is fairly solid that you can build around. They just need they need centers. They need top 6 centers. And again, that is not easy. And we've said this off the air. I mentioned to you, what about Giroux? And you're well, cap space is going to be an issue. It is going to be an issue. I think this team has to get kind of creative with how they divvy out their cap space. I think one area where you can make a move is you have 2 left shot defensemen in Grzelcyk and Riley who essentially do similar things. I think given that Grzelcyk's probably going to need shoulder surgery this offseason, I think Riley would probably be the more valuable commodity for other teams. I'm curious what you think the direction of this team should be and how you kind of do it.
It all lies into what even let's say, just for the sake of argument, that Bergeron retires again. Yes. I don't think it's going to be fire sale of moving Marchand or Pastrnak or what have you, because as you said, how many teams do you see fully blow it up and then it's an immediate return? And don't say the fucking Rangers, who lucked into some of those picks that aren't good. Lafreniere and Kakko are not that good. It's all right, they also made one of the biggest gambles on a guy like Panarin, and it's worked out fantastic. It was well worth it. But when you saw that contract, you're oh shit,
those usually don't work out.
Yeah, those usually don't work out. And that's one where you're all right, it's kind of like when Chicago's offseason last year, you're all right, you're rebuilding, so you're spending money on these guys. Is this really going to work out? And then you had Shesterkin, who was a 4th round pick, I think, just go unconscious. That was not a traditional full rebuild that New York did, even if they had that dumb email they sent out to their people after Tim Schaller scored on them. But you
and Brendan Smith is still in the league somehow, which is wild.
But look at Detroit. That's a team that a lot of history, a lot of ownership, committed to winning. They have a great, management team now with Steve Yzerman there. Got good young players. Seider probably should win the Calder. They got Raymond. They've got good pieces in place. It ain't easy. That team still has a lot of young pieces, and they were giving up 6-7 goals by the end of it. They were getting punked routinely, and that's a proud franchise with a lot of good people running the ship. It's not easy, guys. Again, if Bergeron's not back, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be some lean years, but it's all about, I think, then restocking and building around this current core. You have a core in place, which is you have a leg up on a lot more teams, right? It's all about kind of supplementing that potential. But again, if Bergeron's back, then you switch it all around. That I think you try to find other ways to add to this group, which is easier said than done. It's going to require, as you said, probably moving one of Grzelcyk or Riley. I imagine Riley. Probably looking at buying out Foligno's contract, which saves you $2 million. You have to look at maybe if there's any other guys on 1-year deals that you would be able to move. You look at even a team like Vegas that's trying to swap contracts, whether you get another guy like a even like a Smith or like Carlson or something like that. But it's easier said than done. This past offseason really hampered them in the fact that they don't have nearly as much cap space or flexibility, that you're going to have to do some hockey trades in order to kind of move this cap in and out. It's not like last year we had kind of a blank check to really try to cover up some of the flaws you had on that team.
And I think it's also difficult with this team because again, like, you would ideally, let's say Bergeron comes back, right? Ideally, you would want to put a real second line center behind him, right? Whether that be Claude Giroux or signing Philip Forsberg. But if DeBrusk goes, you also kind of need another top 6 wing.
Yeah.
But if DeBrusk goes, that frees up cap space. So do you want to be adding cap space back? Again, these are not easy decisions. These are not easy, like, thing. You could kind of have to give and take. I put way more of a premium on, like, you need a consistent second line center. Like, and again, Erik Haula was good during the regular season, but I just think for future's sake, especially if Bergeron leaves, if Bergeron retires and you go into next season with Coyle, Haula, Nosek, like Foligno down the middle, you have a problem. Then it's like, okay. But I do think, like, I'd like to think this franchise would, if they lost Bergeron, if Bergeron retired, I would like to think they would do something drastic to improve the center position, not blow it up, but like make moves that you could acquire, whether it be a Pierre-Luc Dubois or a Mark Scheifele or something like that. Again, that probably requires like Fabian Lysell or maybe Lohrei or future first, which you will not, as of right now, you do not have one at this upcoming draft. So, like, is it another rebuild on the fly? I don't know. It's an interesting case because also, like, when they did the rebuild on the fly in the mid 2010s, Dougie Hamilton's situation was pretty bad, so they dealt him for a first round pick, right? Cool. Milan Lucic was he like a year away from free agency at that point? I forget.
I'd have to look at it again, but I think he had some term left that's really more appealing.
Yeah, and you got a first for him, and that was a tough deal to make. I don't know if there's anyone on this roster that you would deal in situations like that to either bolster your draft stock or to add to other parts of the lineup. Like, I don't, and maybe I'm too focused on them, but I just don't know of anyone that you deal that gets you a lot in return that's reasonable, especially if you want to still compete. So that's the issue. Like, I don't like Taylor Hall. You're not going to deal Taylor Hall. And that's, again, like, that's long contract, all those things. So again, these are things we're going to get into a lot this offseason, stuff we got to have, answers for. And again, Sweeney's set to speak later this week. It's funny, I was thinking about this today on D, with the way the defense is and with the way their cap space is, I would not be surprised to see them go into next season with Lindholm, McAvoy, Grzelcyk, Carlo, or Riley Carlo, whoever gets dealt, and Forbert Clifton. I would not be surprised to see that be the 6. Do you see them adding it on D?
No, I don't think so. I think you did also, just with the lack of cap flexibility you have, I'm sure you'd like to maybe add another bigger guy. That's why, like, I think last year I kept on saying, like, sign a guy like Hakanpää, like just this big lumbering dude to have out there. I don't think you have that flexibility to get a guy like that at this point. So whether it's having that 6 guy, as you mentioned, or even a guy like Zaboral, who signed a 2-year extension, that again, he had that ACL injury, but he was playing really well. Like, it was a shame that he went down with that injury. That, who knows, maybe he's a guy that stepped into that role and becomes a very strong, third pairing guy or depth guy. I think when he got hurt, he was also on the right side. Like, he can play the right side as well. So if Clifton, who, again, I think was playing good hockey at the very end of the season, but has his ups and downs, I think over an 82 game span, if he is competing for minutes with Zaboral and those guys push each other, it's a good thing. It's a good problem to have. Right. So I think right now, would you like to maybe add a piece or two? Yeah, of course, if there's anyone out there that's like a cheap value add, but I think right now your priority has to be fixing that that forward core, or bracing for whatever happens if Bergeron's not around next year.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on this. I don't think there's any change going in net. I think Swayman and Ullmark are going to be the guys going into next season, especially given Ullmark's contract. I think D is fine. I think, again, it comes down to your top six. I'm curious if they may, I mean, again, Curtis Lazar is a free agent. Sounds like Anton Bleed probably isn't coming back, given that, you know, he says he doesn't want to sit doesn't want to sit in the press box with us. Can you believe that? With us, he doesn't want to sit with us and watch the game. Ridiculous. There's so much money too to just sit with us and watch the game. And have some popcorn, or as Marchand says, the snack bar. But yeah, I'm very intrigued by what they're going to end up doing up front, because things have to be done. This cannot be an internal competition thing. Like we hear so often from Don Sweeney, oh, we're going to let, you know, remember like after Char and Krug left that offseason the next year, oh, internal competition will decide on D. That went really south. There should not be internal competition up front. There should be a defined 1 and 2C. And again, because like, as we've said, your top 6 wings, Marchand, Pastrnak, Hall, whether it be Lysell or whoever, like that's a good top 6 bunch of wings. You have one problem though. Who the hell do you put between them? And that's why, I mean, again, I think if Bergeron comes back, I do think going out and signing a guy like Drew, if you can find a way to make it work, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But again, like his money is going to be high. Andrew Kopp's money is going to be high because these guys just had sick numbers when they went to their new teams. And that's the other thing. Like, that's why free agency is so dangerous, because you're paying these guys so much money. And it's tough to tell. Again, like Giroux's a little bit more stable with points, but like, would you pursue like an Andrew Kopp, or would you sign like Philip Forsberg to a big long-term deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all just depends on what the long-term view is, right? Because if it's one of those guys like a Kopp, I don't know if that's a guy that moves the needle in terms of building for that next generation. Like Kopp, maybe you add to put you over the top if Bergeron's back, but let's say it's one where you're like Forsberg would make a little bit more sense in terms of like a legit franchise piece that you add to this core, kind of like Lindholm, where, you know, you got maybe 4 or 5 years of elite play from him and you're trying to win then. When a guy like, let's say McAvoy's 27, 28 as well. But I mean, it's tough. Like this free agent class, you have some good solid pieces out there. It's just how much cap flexibility do you have? Because again, like, let's just say a guy like Forsberg, great player. Bruins fans would love him. I'm sure there'd be probably some Bruins fans would be pissed because he's too flashy. He's not gritty enough, but legit talent. Like he is a beast. So I think that's one situation you'd look at it in that way, where if you're trying to sign these guys, you have to get very creative, because you're not moving out, you know, even if you want to buy out Foligno or move a guy like Riley for peanuts, you got to still move more cap space. Because also don't forget, like if Bergeron comes back, what's he signing for? I don't think it's going to be his current contract, but I don't think, you know, Bruins, you're going to hear like some people probably call into the radio, be like, well, if he signs for like 1 million or something like that, like Rass, it's like Patrice Bergeron, if he comes back, is going to be coming off of winning his 5th Selke. He is still an elite player. He's not signing for $1 million. So there's a whole lot to juggle. I mean, again, there's so many things that you can roll through in terms of how this offseason is going to pan out. And it all revolves around the next step that Bergeron wants to take, whether it's go back for 19 season or hang up his skates, which he's already accomplished quite a bit in his career. So all the power to him, but we'll see what happens.
I will end on this. Do you have a official opinion you want to tell people about Bergeron? Do you think he stays? Do you think he goes? Or do you not want to give it yet because you haven't come to a conclusion yet? Because there's a lot of beat people, a lot of trusted people who are saying that they think he's done. Yeah. And I think that's a pretty big thing.
Yeah. I'll say right now, I'd probably put it at like 55 that he's back and 45 that he's not back, which is pretty close, right? I think that's it's one where if you ask me, like, let's say back at the start of the year, like back in September when he first mentioned it, I would be like, oh, okay, he's going to take his time, but he'll sign a 1-year deal. Like he's still probably good. And then you like, as the season went on, you're like, all right, well, he's probably going to win a Selke. He's still playing at an elite level. Like if Patrice was dealing with a long-term injury or was really banged up at the end of the year, or his, high standard of play was dipping where he was, played 70 games but had like 40 something points, then he'd be like, all right, like he's not going to be a guy that's going to be a 3C when he's 42, right? Like he's going to hang up his skates before then.
Like Chara.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, he doesn't want to be like a journeyman or anything like that, or especially just a guy with a reduced role. So throughout that process, I was like, all right, I think he's still going to be back, but I think there's just other things that weigh heavily. You look at just kind of his emotions in the immediate aftermath of that game, of Marchand's emotions, especially being so emotional, talking about Patrice and his legacy and what he did for Marchand's own game. And just the fact that I think, you know, Patrice is not a guy where you can maybe just chalk it up to the fact of, you know, baseline production or money or anything like that. I think for him, it's just whether or not it's time with, you know, his family and all that he's given and the amount of damage his body sustained. Like, it's not something where I think you just look at the bullet points of, you know, money or anything like that and have it be the determining factor. I think it's just for him. When it's time, it's time. And I think he probably doesn't even know right now. I imagine he's still going to do a little bit of soul searching. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be like, I have it 55-45. You know, there's other people who have said that they think he's going to retire, and I could be like, that makes sense too. Like it's not one where I think it's leaning heavily one way or the other. I think it's kind of a toss up right now. Not a safe bet, Evan.
Not a safe bet. I think he goes to the Montreal Canadiens.
No, yeah, that's a bad bet. Yeah,
he's going right to the Canadiens.
Yeah.
I think he ultimately signs a 1-year deal and stays. I think it's very close, though. I don't think it's like an easy decision. I don't think he wakes up tomorrow and it's like, oh, I'm coming back. I think it's going to take time. I think it's close. Again, as you said, would not surprise me if he retired. But my hunch is that he does stay. I do think he stays because he is still elite. He is still impactful. He is the captain. I just have a hard time seeing him walking. I have a hard time seeing him ultimately walk away, but it also wouldn't surprise me. So lots of things, Conor, this offseason. This is going to be a crazy offseason. And we will have you covered with Bruins Beat, Poke the Bear. What can people look forward to from you over at Boston Sports Journal? I know you had some features in the works that they're coming. You got media days stuff. You got, you promote it. I don't want to promote it.
We have obviously throughout this week, there'll be plenty to break down, to comb over with the off season, the next steps for the Bruins. As you said earlier, Cassidy will be speaking this week, Don Sweeney, Cam Neely. So a lot of big picture things in terms of what the next step is for this team, which can go in any sort of direction. So a lot of it's going to be a really fascinating offseason, and we'll have you covered every step of the way with, previews of free agency, trades, next steps, all that stuff over at BSJ. So subscribe at bostonsportsjournal.com. Want to follow me on Twitter? You can do that at ConorRyan_93.
I will tease this. Conor has a prediction that he told me after a podcast recently that's going to blow your socks off. That might be coming soon, whether it be in a story or in a podcast form. I hope I'm allowed to say that, and that I didn't just do something. I'm just
scribbling on my whiteboard. I'm just ripping all my notes up now, Evan.
But anyways, Bruins Beat. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners, have an amazing rest of your week, and thank you for all your support during this regular season.